This is the Pathway to Change podcast. So nice to meet you, Luke.
Lovely to meet you as well.
We are here in Oslo, outside Ullevål Stadium. You are here this week for a tour with Manchester United.
Yes, I'm here with the Manchester United Scandinavian Supporters Association as a guest. There's a few old players coming down to spend a little time with the fans and hopefully enjoy a fantastic game tomorrow.
That's awesome. How do you like Oslo?
It's the first time I've ever been to Norway, so it's obviously the weather's fantastic today, and it's obviously a beautiful flying in this morning. The countryside was picturesque, and it's a beautiful place so far. Even more beautiful if Man United beat Atletico Madrid tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a friendly match, but do you think is going to be some competitiveness there?
Yeah, I think when professional teams play, regardless whether it's a pre-season friendly, it's always a competitive game. Obviously, two fantastic teams. Manchester United have got a lot to improve on after last season's performances. The new managers come in and hopefully we can see that improvement that we've seen so far, albeit again in pre-season in the tour in Australia.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. When you travel around for football, a football gig like this, do you miss it? Miss being...
I think when I first finished playing, I really missed it and struggled not having it. I think now I'm at an age where I know that the legs can't do it anymore. It's always nice to come and watch games. And I think I'm at a time in my life now where that football playing career is over and it's time to do other bits and pieces now.
Yeah, all right. So what are you up to nowadays? What are you...
So at the moment, I'm part of an organisation called the Football Fun Factory, which is an organisation, a coaching organisation for children in the UK, which, as the name suggests, is around making football fun. And more than that, using football as a vehicle to develop really positive life skills in children and developing a love for the game at a really young age, regardless of the child's ability, just the enjoyment factor, really. And it's obviously a really rewarding organisation to be involved in and be part of positive impacts on young children enjoying football, far removed from professional football and my days in there, but still nice to be involved in football in some way.
That's awesome. So why do you think you chose to do this Football Fun Factory? Was it you that started it or was it someone else?
So it was a couple of my colleagues that I worked with when I was coaching in professional football. And I think the reason I'm involved, I think it reminds me so much of my early experiences of a child starting to play football at 6, 7, 8 years old. And all the memories I have of that are having fun doing it. I can't remember any sort of technical or tactical information I was given. I just remember running around, chasing the ball and enjoying it. I think it's them really positive early experiences, like anything you do in life. If you enjoy something from an early age, you tend to go on doing it. So that's a massive reason for me being involved. I think, like I mentioned, when I come to the end of my footballing career, it was a real struggle mentally for me, accepting that I wasn't a football player anymore. And I went down the route of coaching, doing all my coaching qualifications, working at a professional football club. And it should have been a dream job for an old football player because that's what you tend to do when you stop playing. But I didn't love it. I didn't love getting up in the morning. It didn't feel like a passion of mine. It was all a bit too serious at such a young age for children in terms of what it requires at the age of 6, 7, 8, training 3 times a week, and I think it lost a sense of enjoyment. And now just being in football purely to make it fun and enjoyable feels so much more rewarding for me and my life.
Do you think that's a big change in football, that it's become more serious and more harsh in a way?
Yeah, I think you recognise it more as you get older. I think that is the industry, really. That's what football is. I think football in general, children are attached to professional clubs, in my opinion, maybe too early, where they miss out on that enjoyment of playing with their
the
school.
Youngest are like 13, 14 years when they get kind of like almost contracts with the big clubs.
Exactly that. And I think in the UK, the kids sign at 8, 9 years old, and
8 to 9 years
they're
old.
playing that early just for a professional football team. And I think along the way, at times, don't get me wrong, there's loads of brilliant work that goes on in professional football, but in my opinion, the journey gets lost a little bit, and it all becomes about the destination of becoming a footballer, when in reality that doesn't happen very often. It's such a small percentage of kids that go through and make a career out the game. I think the most important thing has to be the journey, wherever that may be, of enjoying it. And there's so many valuable life lessons to learn in football, but I think sometimes that gets lost along the way to a certain extent, because it is all around that becoming a professional footballer.
What are those valuable life lessons? What do you think?
I think I was incredibly fortunate to come through at a club like Manchester United and signing for them at the age of 14, and sort of understanding what an incredible culture it was back then. Of course, now hopefully the good times will return soon, but back then it was an amazing place to be at. And I went up there at 14 years old as a really shy, introverted young man, and was obviously incredibly excited, but lots of trepidation as well about going to one of the biggest clubs in the world. And it was what I was met with me when I get up there. Everyone seemed so pleased to see you. Everyone was so happy to be there. There was so much enthusiasm about it, and that sort of rubbed off on us as young people, and sort of what it meant to play for a club like Manchester United. It wasn't just about the football. It was about the person you were as well, and learning about being humble, being honest, what was expected of how hard you worked every day. And there was a huge amount of lessons I learned as a young man, and as well as all my peers, I'm sure, of being at that special club at a really special time.
The culture kind of seeped into you a little bit.
Exactly that. The culture, it was such an amazing culture, such an amazing environment, and you felt part of that. Even as a young kid at 14, 15 years old, you felt immersed in that, and you wanted to be part of that. You wanted to stay part of that, and it was an amazing experience playing for the club for the short amount of time I did. And I'm so grateful, because it shapes you, who you become as a human being, them early life lessons that we were all lucky enough to learn back then.
It seems like you have this core value of making football fun, or kind of building fun into life, and also especially for children, I guess. Was that also ingrained in the culture there, or was that something you've had with you from before?
Yeah, I think I always, from the moment I kicked a ball, I just fell in love with football. It became my life. I loved doing it, whether it was on my own in the garden or in the living room or with my mates down the park and just playing it. And I think that just got stronger and stronger. And then when I went to Manchester United, it was just such a special place. It was like Disneyland for football for a child to go to Manchester United. And because the training ground back then was a really small, sort of intimate place where you'd be a 15-year-old kid and you'd rub shoulders with Eric Cantona, David Beckham, Ryan Giggs, these people that you watched on the TV at the weekend, and it just made you feel 1,000-foot tall to be part of that. And I think the experiences that I had at Manchester United have certainly shaped the way that I feel about football, of falling in love with the game. And although it was such a huge club, as a young player there, as a schoolboy, as an apprentice, you still were so encouraged to express yourself, go and do what you're good at. And I think them lessons and that enjoyment that I had in my early stages of my career has certainly shaped how I feel about football today. And that enjoyment factor, like regardless whether you're going to play for Manchester United or for the local team on a Sunday morning, whoever it is, there's nothing better than having love for what you're doing. And I think that's what a massive part of what the Football Fun Factory is encouraging that love of something, a healthy social activity that you can enjoy for a lifetime.
Yeah, I played football yesterday. I scored 2 goals actually.
Oh, fantastic.
I was very happy with it. What is it like? What do you, in the Football Fun Factory, how do you promote the fun? What are like the activities you do, or the
So we run 3 sort of core programs in the Football Fun Factory. So the first one's called Football Tots Fun, and that's for children between 2 to 5 years old. It's a session that's held inside a massive inflatable football pitch, and it's an opportunity for parents to come with their children and enjoy them first moments of a child playing football. I mean, what the 2 to 5 year olds on our sessions see football as is a massive inflatable pitch, massive footballs, loads of different activities going on. It's a lot different to how you and I see football, but that's such a positive first experience.
So you just fill this huge inflatable pitch with hundreds of kids, and they walk around kicking small balls.
So not quite 100. It's not that big. There's probably room for about 14, 15 children in it, but they come in. It's a 45-minute session. The first 15 minutes is always free play, so the children are walking around with their parents, the coaches, engaging and interacting with the child and the parent, and then there's a 30-minute structured session. I use the word structured very loosely because, as you can imagine, children between 2 and 5 years old, it is organised chaos, but embracing that chaos. When I first came on board with the Football Fun Factory, that session, the TOTS Football Fun for the 2 to 5 year olds, put the fear of God into me in terms of all I was used to was playing football and working with elite kids that are playing at professional football clubs, and I didn't know what I was gonna do with them, but sort of worked to the session plan. Half of the kids were listening to me. I remember sitting them all down after the free play, had all the cones laid out, different activities laid out. The children were throwing them all over the place, not listening to what I was saying. I was thinking, what am I doing, sort of thing.
You were with the whistle and nothing was working.
At the end of the session, it was complete chaos, organised chaos. But at the end of the session, the kids were walking out with smiles on their face, saying to mum or dad, when can we come to football again? And without doubt, it was the most rewarding training session I'd ever done, because these kids were just like having fun, doing something, playing football, and that's what they saw football as. So that was like a real eye-opener of what that positive impact you can have on such young children in such a short space of time. So we also run sessions for 5 to 12 years old. That is, we don't use any football inflatables in that session. It's as close as we get traditional football coaching, but it's all built around fun, enjoyment, and probably more importantly, using football as a vehicle to develop positive life skills just as much as football skills. At the end of every session, we hand out a blue card or some blue cards to participants on the programme, and usually in football, cards are a bad thing, a yellow card or a red card for doing something bad in the game, but the blue card is a real positive card that's given out to the child or children who have shown the most incredible human qualities. So it might be helping another child do their shoelaces up, helping the coach set the equipment out, that sort of thing, to real promote that development in the child, rather than just the little boy or girl who's incredibly gifted at football and scoring lots of goals.
They should have the blue cards in the real football matches as well.
Yeah, I don't think they'd hand them out as much as they would the yellow and red cards, but it's certainly an idea. I'll send an email over to FIFA on that one and see if they can promote it there.
The positive reinforcements. I think in adult life, we feel like that positive reinforcement is something that's like is only for kids, but I think in organizations and in education, I think it's really important to continue that. I think so. So I like the blue cards. I thought that was a good idea.
Yeah, like you say, I think whether you're child or an adult, I think it is around everything in life is about relationships, isn't it? The way you treat people, how you expect them to treat you, and I think the children having that upbringing in terms of understanding the importance of that, the importance of showing positive life skills, hopefully will then, when they go into adulthood, it will serve them well in terms of moving forward in their lives and whatever career path that they choose to go down.
I want to ask you a little bit more about... So this podcast is a lot about change. so this might be a little bit of an open question, but in what ways do you feel like you have changed as a person in your life?
That's a tough question you've thrown at me there. I think being a footballer is I'm incredibly grateful to have had a career doing something I love. But it's a strange life, really, where you are in essence a child. You're told where to be at what time. Everything's done for you, and you go and do that. I think coming out of football is a real stark reality of starting again, as it were. I think from the age of sort of 9, 10 years old, I saw myself as a footballer. I was come from a little village in Cambridgeshire, and I was always seen as a gifted footballer. I was probably better than my peers. I'd score a lot of goals, and probably saw myself as a footballer from a young age, and then was lucky enough to have a career in football, went through my football career, obviously always known as a football player, and probably saw myself more as a football player as actually a human being. So
It was very core in your identity.
without a doubt, so probably too big in terms of when I look back now, probably didn't educate myself and understand myself enough because I just saw myself as a football player. If everything was going well at football, then that's great. If things weren't going well at football, then it's like the world's ending sort of thing. And I think coming out of football is a massive challenge in any sport, really, coming out of professional sport. And in my case, I can only speak from my own experiences, but losing so much identity of what am I now? Where do I sort of fit in the world? I was always Luke Chadwick, the football player. Now I'm a person, and I don't. What skill set have I got? What do I do now? And that was a massive challenge, a massive eye opener, but also a massive opportunity to sort of learn about myself. Like I'm just a normal person. I've always a normal person, but probably didn't notice that as much back then. So it was about re-identifying, knowing who I am, and sort of finding a pathway now. When your football career mine came to end at 34, 35, you think to yourself, well, that's the best bit of life's finished now. But in reality, it's another chapter. Life's just getting started, really. And I think it was switching that mindset of just plodding through life to sort of re-energizing and accepting. I think you go through I went through probably a mourning period of football was, other than my family, football was my first love. I fell in love with it. And then that relationship came to an end because I couldn't play it anymore, and probably didn't understand how much of an impact that would have on my life in general. And probably went through a period of 2-3 years of really struggling mentally, and before sort of accepting it's over. You've mourned football now, it's finished, and you've got to, if you want to have a positive life, move on to something else. And I think that's where the Football Fun Factory's had a massive positive impact in terms of starting something new, growing it, having real hunger behind that. Obviously, the support of my close family and friends, and that network has been got me through that challenging time. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought when he was walking around with that. Excuse me. So I'd probably say just re-identifying with myself has been the biggest step that I've made in terms of understanding that it's time for a new chapter in life now.
Yeah, because when football, which was so important to you, was kind of at the center of your life, suddenly disappears, you have to put something else there. And you say that Football Fun Factory has been part of what has become a kind of a new center in your life, like a purpose, something that you enjoy, something that you can grow and work with. Did you, apart from obviously kind of getting the job there, but did you do anything? Were there any kind of practices or habits or actions that you did to kind of start again and build that something in your core?
Yeah, I think it was more sort of developing some emotional intelligence. Don't get me wrong, the Football Fun Factory has been fantastic in terms of something to work on and really drive forward with. But I think it was more important the work done on my own in terms of internally to deal with that situation. I think I've really lacked emotional intelligence, sort of struggled with any sort of vulnerability in terms of, I think that's what football certainly was back when I started playing. I think it's improved there, but where vulnerability was probably seen as a weakness in professional football, where in essence it's probably, well, it is, in my opinion, our biggest strength, that openness to allow yourself to be vulnerable and deal with them internal thoughts and negative thoughts to sort of get through that. And I think it was sort of allowing vulnerability into my life.
How do you do that?
I think it came automatically, really. I remember just sort of in quite a dark place, sort of working at a professional football club, coaching, but not really enjoying it, not living my life right, not sort of communicating with my family and friends in a positive way, probably drinking too much. And it just got to a point where I just literally just broke down. And that was probably the best thing that could have happened to me, that real outpouring of emotion and allowing myself to be vulnerable. And rather than feeling bad about it, it felt like a massive weight off my shoulder, just allowing that.
Because did you keep a lot of things to yourself, and you had like the threshold to talking about it? Was it
yeah,
it
and I think it always kept things. I never wanted to put my problems onto someone else. I was more the sort of character that was just happy if other people were happy. That was sort of good enough for me, and I don't want to make them unhappy by talking about my inner feelings, which is wrong, really, because it's so important. The only person we can truly look after is ourselves. In essence, that's what we can do. And if we can develop that really positive relationship with ourselves and love ourselves unconditionally, it allows us to then love those closest to us on a deeper level. And I think it was that outpouring of emotion that this felt obviously not good, that you're crying your eyes out, but took a massive weight off my shoulder. And I think allowing myself to do that then allowed me to talk about my problems, to seek help where I needed it. And I think that, without doubt, is a huge part of my life and really changed my life in a positive way.
I think that's so important and really well illustrated. That that vulnerability is a word that is often used, but it's sometimes a little bit difficult to make it concrete in a way. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I completely understand.
And so for you, it was a lot to do with communication and allowing yourself to tell your close family and friends when you had a rough day, or when you is that right? Was it communication like a big part of it for you?
Yeah, I'd also say sort of communication with self, because even when I was feeling really low and whatnot, it was just I'd always say to myself, just pull yourself together and just keep plodding along. And I think allowing myself to accept that things aren't right then allowed me to, like, that internal communication then allowed me to communicate to them closest to me and speak to people and sort of work through the issues that I was going through. And I think I think the most important thing was admitting to myself, although sort of subconsciously knowing things obviously aren't right, it was a case of just pull yourself together, it'll be fine. But then finally just allowing things aren't fine. And I think that was a massive breakthrough in my life, to allow myself to then communicate with others, to seek help and talk through my problems, which always takes such a huge weight off your shoulder when you are communicating it and you let out them issues.
Do you see that same story happening with other footballers? Do you think it's a common thing about for footballers to be kind of I don't know the word for it. Yeah, but have struggled with being vulnerable, being very kind of strict with yourself. just get on with it. You're supposed to deal with this.
Without a doubt, I think it's a massive issue in football. Like at times, obviously, in a football career, your mental health fluctuates. Like in any industry, your mental health is going to fluctuate all the time. I think in football, the biggest challenge, and again, I can only speak from my personal experiences, coming to the end of your football career, wherever that may be, whether it be fortunate enough like me to have a long career in football or in them early stages. But I think that is where we're still at a crossroads where things have improved, where sort of we speak about vulnerability, that openness to speak about mental health. There is a lot more avenues to do that, but I think there still needs to be so much more education in terms of that to allow people, like whatever job you're doing, if you've been doing a job for a long period of time and then you suddenly come out of it, there's always going to be sort of issues of whether they be big issues, small issues, whatever they may be, there's always going to be challenges involved in that. But I think when you're coming out of a professional sport where you're doing something that you loved, you've fulfilled all your dreams, and you don't get me wrong, you're incredibly lucky to have done that. But then it comes to an end, and there has to be more education around sort of dealing with that end part of a career.
Since you had this kind of breakthrough a couple of years ago, or when you finished football, are you in a good place now?
Yeah, probably like now, I look back now and I'm probably the happiest I've ever been in my life. Obviously, football was great, but it was always, you're buzzing if you played well, but then you play rubbish the next game and you go from one extreme to another. It's so up and down. Now I feel on a really even keel, and I feel in the best place my mental health's ever been, and I'm really happy with what I'm doing. I've got a really secure, happy home life, and I certainly can't complain with how things are at the moment.
That's awesome. Are there any things that you do to sustain your mental health?
Yeah, I think there's plenty of things. I think I'm a lot more relaxed now. I think like I mentioned, in football, there's always the next game, there's always stress, pressure, and don't get me wrong, that can be really positive at times and obviously builds a lot of resilience. But now I feel I'm just content in myself. I've got a really good relationship with myself, which I've not always had at times, where you sort of fall out of love with yourself and whatnot, or just don't feel happy but now I've got sort of unconditional love for myself. I like myself a lot. I like the person that I am. Obviously, there's times when I've got the ump if something goes wrong and not, but I can deal with them situations in a lot more positive way. I practice gratitude. I'm so thankful for everything that I've got and I've achieved in my life, and sort of I think it's so, and it's sort of quite a cliche around sort of staying in the now. And I think that's always a challenge when I was playing football, where you're always looking 5 games ahead and whatnot. But now I'm quite content in staying in the now, taking each day as it comes and just enjoying life, really.
I really like that. So you say both that you put weight on staying in the present, not chasing goals ahead all the time like you did when you played football. And also you said you practice gratitude. Could you say a little bit more about how you practice gratitude?
I think gratitude is something that I don't think I had a great deal of, or didn't sort of feel it enough going throughout my football career. But I think obviously there's so much sort of literature around gratitude, how sort of positive it can be for your mental health. So I tend to keep a journal each day of everything that's happened that I'm grateful for. Think about the day after, the things that I'm grateful that I'm going to be doing the next day, and I always try and sort of keep that up. And obviously, when in a business sense, if things haven't gone well, sort of just reminding of being grateful of how far we've come. If I have an argument with my children and my wife, just be grateful for the relationship that we have had and for what they've done for me over the years and still do, and and how close we are as a family and friends. I think it's just it always brings you back. You can't sort of feel angry when you feel grateful. And I think I've got so much to be grateful for. And I think everyone has, if you look at it a little deeper, there's so much in life. We're sat here in a beautiful cafe in a beautiful city. The sun's out. There's so much to be grateful for just sat here today. And I think it is something that, and it can be sort of looked upon as a little bit wishy-washy and whatnot, and people won't sort of take it on board. But I think it is a real game changer, just being able to feel grateful for what we all have.
I think that's awesome. And even though some people might feel the wishy-washiness of gratitude, there's a lot of research also connecting gratitude very closely with happiness. And it makes sense what you said, that you can't be grateful and angry or whatever. I don't remember which word you used, but if you're grateful, you're not. It's difficult to be unhappy at the same time.
Yeah, and I think when you think of things you're grateful for, if you are in a negative place, it completely turns your mindset, and it's like a switch going off, and just thinking about that things that we have, what we've done, what we're going to do. I think it is so important, and it really can sort of change your life without a shadow of a doubt.
Would you say that, or how do you said you had a journal? Is it like a pen and paper journal, or you use a phone or computer, or
Yeah,
what's your
I'm
favorite?
Absolutely useless with technology. That's why I'm so impressed with the setup you've got here today that you've threw up in 20 minutes, wherever it was. So I'm old school, as it were. I've just got my journal, and I'll write it in there. And so sometimes I write, I'm so grateful. Sometimes it will say, thank you so much. So I mix it up a bit, but think about all them little things that make the world a fantastic place to live in.
No, I think that's really inspiring, and I can't see why more people shouldn't keep a journal for gratitude. I think it's such a powerful tool. I have to I have to ask you some questions of friends of mine who are Manchester United supporters. So
Yeah.
they want to know, who is the best player that you've ever played with?
Yeah, I've probably been asked that question about a million times, and I always answer the same way. It was Paul Scholes was the best player I ever played with.
Wow.
He was an absolute genius. Don't get me wrong, there was 20 world-class players at Manchester United, but Scholes was just every day in training. It was like he had eyes in the back of his head. He was so aware of everything going on around him, such an intelligent player, could pass short, pass long, shoot. So I always say Paul Scholes was the best I ever played with.
Who was the most difficult to play against?
Play against, probably in my younger days, I was playing on the right wing and played against Ashley Cole quite a lot, and he was the hardest defender to get past. He was so sort of quick and wiry, and we was sort of a similar build, and I could just never couldn't get past him much. So I'd probably say he was the best defender that I was played against.
Awesome. What would you say is so nowadays? What would you say is your expertise?
Expertise, I think, in terms of my skill set, I'm incredibly enthusiastic. I love to learn new things. I think my expertise is trying to build relationships, obviously with the role that I'm in at the Football Fun Factory, trying to grow a business. It's really important to develop really strong relationships with our coaches, with external organisations that we work with. So I think it is around positively communicating and building relationships, which is something that really surprises me to say that, because as a footballer, I was a quiet guy, enjoyed a laugh with the lads, but probably was worried about myself, just looking after myself to achieve the most that I could achieve, which in turn helps the team that I'm playing for. Now it's completely changed, where it is around sort of working with a huge amount of other people and trying to incorporate really positive relationships with all of them people. Going back probably to when we spoke about the environment at Manchester United, which was a a world-class environment. He's trying to recreate that to a certain extent in a completely different world.
Do you think that is related in a way, that the fact that because you said you were, as a young footballer, you were shy, introverted, and now that when I ask you what's your expertise, it's kind of paradoxically being able to build relationships and connecting with people.
Yeah, it is huge. Like, if someone asked me back then if I'd be doing something like I'm doing now, I'd be say, no, not a chance, sort of thing. But I think it is that fact of understanding yourself. I mean, you never know what you can do until you try it, can you? So I think sort of stepping out of my comfort zone of professional football, whether that be playing or coaching, and doing something completely different, has probably to a certain extent forced me to step out my comfort zone. And I think what I recognise is I quite enjoy being out of it, and I want to learn more, I want to do more. So I think, again, it is that sort of recognising a skill set that you probably didn't realise that you had in a certain industry, but you come out of that and then you have got it in a different industry, which is incredible, really, but something amazing that we've all got inside us if we're prepared to step outside the norm and step outside our comfort zone.
What do you think is if someone struggled with the thing that you are good at, building the relationships? For example, someone works in a company and kind of feels introverted or feels like they struggle with making those relationships. What would your advice be, or what do you think?
Yeah, it's hard. Obviously, it's so easy to say, just go and do it, isn't it? Because people just don't do that. And I think it is maybe taking them small steps first. I think if you're inside a big organisation or a company, it could be emailing people you don't usually email and sort of asking them for the opportunity to sit down for some advice and have a chat with them. Because I think it's such a powerful thing to do when you're maybe a quiet person. It's something with the sort of electronic media now where you can set things up, and whether it be a Zoom call or something like that, but you're making them, that'd make someone's day. And I don't think we realise that as enough. If you were to contact the director or someone like that in an organisation and say, I'm really looking for some advice, please could you help me out? And that'd make their day as well. And I think that makes for a really open conversation, and not an easy thing to do, but just connecting with different people and maybe sort of making them small steps first before then meeting up and then pitching to a couple of people and talking to some more people. Again, really easy for me to say that, but I think it is the first time you step out your comfort zone is the hardest, isn't it? Every time after that, it gets easier and easier, and then suddenly you find yourself, I'm comfortable in this situation now. So really challenging to do to start with, but I think, like anything, the more you can force yourself to do it and do them things that you wouldn't usually do, the more comfortable you become doing it, and the more you step out your comfort zone even further and further.
I think that's really interesting how asking for advice is, it feels like you're, it kind of depends on how you frame it, but often when you ask for advice, it's actually the other person, like you said, it made their day.
Exactly that, and I don't think we recognise that enough. Asking someone, I'd love to learn from your expertise, that's going to make them feel $1 million, and they're more than likely get back to you and love to give you your time. And I think it's sort of working on them relationships of, you can make someone else's day at the same time you'll be making a massive step yourself because you've put yourself out there and done that.
And I thought that was really good. Okay, I want to ask you about, because for a lot of our listeners are Norwegian, and they might not know, unless they're United fans, they might know too much about your history. But you got quite a lot of attention in, was it 2020, when you made a famous tweet?
Yeah, so it was. So obviously, when I've never been on social media or the like throughout my life, really. And when we started growing the Football Fun Factory, obviously it was a way of sort of growing our identity, growing our following and whatnot, and set up Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., and started sort of putting some tweets out. The majority of them were just terrible jokes, really, and that sort of thing. But then at the start of the pandemic, I wanted to put a tweet out there that had a little bit more meaning, and it was all around sort of when I was a young player at Manchester United, I received a lot of attention for the way that I looked in a negative way. I had sort of teeth that stuck out, spots all over my face, and was maybe sort of picked on in that respect on a TV show back then that was on BBC One, watched by millions of people, and it had a really negative impact on my mental health. And it was something that I was so embarrassed, ashamed about, that I'd never speak about it to anyone. I'd just sort of get on with it. If anyone asked about it, I'd say, no, it's fine. It doesn't bother me. When in reality, it was really affecting my life away from football in a really negative way. So the tweet that I put out at the start of sort of the COVID pandemic, where it was such a strange situation that we were all going throughout the world. I'm sure everyone's mental health was fluctuating because no one knew what was happening, what we were going through. And my tweet just sort of said, if you're struggling, if you're feeling low, the best avenue to take that weight away from you is to talk about your problem, something that I didn't do in my time. And I was incredibly surprised by the sort of exposure that the tweet got, in terms of it probably got twisted a little bit in terms of the media coverage that it received, and it was all more around what I went through back then and pointing fingers at who done it, rather than the sort of the actual basis of the tweet was just a positive message of trying to, and don't get me wrong, I know I'm not some big superstar who loads of people are going to listen to, but if it could help just one person sort of identify with the experience that I went through and then go and talk about the problems, then I'm more than happy with that. So it was, like I say, I got a lot more exposure than I thought, but I got so many messages which incredibly surprised me, from people saying, like, what you said's really helped me, which without doubt is the best feeling I've ever had in my life, in terms of, other than getting married, my children being born and whatnot, but to have had that feeling of helping someone with but such a small thing to do. It was, like I say, it was the feedback that I got from a number of people was mind blowing, really.
I think I'm not surprised by the feedback, because I think it touches on such an important subject, and it becomes even more important these days, because there are so many kids, especially on social media, who are I think like bullying and abuse have always been an important topic, but maybe even less regulated, or even more under the radar now than before. Young kids getting picked on for their appearance or whatever it is. And seeing as you were a footballer, it's kind of similar that footballers are so young and they're exposed to like stadiums of 70,000 people who feel like they can say whatever they want to you. And then suddenly on BBC One, a TV show for the entire nation. Could you say something more about how it made you feel then, so that if someone who's listening now can relate or is in the same situation, and also kind of what would you want to, like, what would you say to young Luke Chadwick, who has just seen being picked on the television from celebrities you didn't know personally, and like, how could you say something more about that?
Yeah, I think in terms of sort of when you speak about inside a football stadium, obviously a lot of stuff that's said, shouted at players inside a football stadium is not wrong. But in my case, I could accept that because I was doing what I loved doing. It was sort of part and parcel of what the game was. It was more sort of the media side of it that that I found hard to accept because it just didn't feel sort of fair, because I was just a young kid playing football and I had no idea how to deal with this whatsoever. I was probably quite sort of guarded, like I didn't know what it was going to entail. Obviously, I've gone up to Manchester United, started playing in and around the first team, a young lad from a little village down in Cambridgeshire to play, and I didn't realise what was going to happen, that people would know who you are. Well, everyone's going to know who you are, but sort of, and having this on the TV, and I think that was a big one in terms of the first time that I saw it, and they were speaking about sort of.
Was it one TV show or was it several? Or
so it was one TV show really, where it was sort of week in, week out, and I remember the first time seeing it, and my stomach just dropped, and I just wanted the world to, the floor to swallow me up, sort of thing. I just felt a feeling of sickness in my stomach and such huge embarrassment and even shame of hearing these people sort of say that about me. And then it was sort of something that ate me up inside, in terms of I didn't want to see it, but I'd watch the show every week and just hope and pray that they wouldn't mention my name this week. And I used to watch it every week, and every week I'd be on there, and it was that same feeling.
it was every week.
Every week that it was on, they sort of said something detrimental about the way that I looked, and it caused such sort of anxiety in me, where that I thought there was something wrong with me, because it was such a sort of schoolboy, sort of what they were saying about the way you looked and that sort of thing. And in my mind, this shouldn't be making you feel as bad as it did, but it did, and it caused, like I say, so much anxiety, where I was obsessed with it, where I wouldn't want to go out the house, other than going to football training, coming home. I didn't want to go out because I was convinced that someone would say something or shout across the street, when in reality that probably wouldn't have happened. But you build something up so much in your mind, and it was so magnified because it was on a really, really popular TV show. So I think it was like really, the whole week was built around that Friday evening, that feeling of dread in your stomach, and then
Really?
praying that it wouldn't come on. And it was such a...
So you would have this, like, it's Wednesday now, so it's 2 days until Friday.
Yeah, it was
mentality.
always sort of that feeling. And then like, don't get me wrong, it was over a period of probably 2 months, something like that. But it felt like 2 years, because it was just a horrible gut-wrenching in feeling, and probably more anger at myself of not knowing what to do and how to cope with it. And because I was so shy and introverted, I wouldn't even say anything to my mum, my dad, my girlfriend, my family, my friends. And it was always just a case of, if someone mentioned it to me, I'd say, just laugh it off and say, yeah, it's fine. When in reality, it was such a horrible, challenging time.
I think it's so common to react that way to for any kind of when you're if you're being bullied or abused in any way. It's so easy to put the blame on yourself, even though that's completely not rational, and then you get angry about your own reactions, because it starts all these defense mechanisms, and it's so common to end up punishing yourself even more.
Definitely. And I think because from the age of 12 years old, all I was looking to do was be a footballer, and probably didn't concentrate enough on my education. But something that I think that's lacking is that, particularly in young people, that education of self and understanding why you feel a certain way in certain situations. And I certainly had, as a 19, 20-year-old boy, no emotional intelligence whatsoever. I didn't know how to deal with that. And I think more education at a younger age of, and don't get me wrong, teachers, schools have got hard enough jobs with maths, English, science and whatnot, but probably the most important subject that we ever learn about is ourselves. And I think having that, if I had more understanding of my feelings and whatnot, I could have dealt with it in a more positive manner. But because if football, it was all about football. I was doing well at football at the time, so I was happy. But then this comes along, and I'm thinking, I've no idea how to deal with this situation because I haven't got any emotional intelligence whatsoever.
If you could kind of send a message to yourself at that time, and people who are listening, if there's someone who's in that situation, they can kind of use that message. But what would you say to yourself at that time?
Yeah, it's again, I've been asked that question so many times, and the person that I was back then, if anyone, myself, whoever said something to me, say go and say something, because of the boy that I was, I still don't think I would have, because of how, if I was a person that I am now and I understand myself a lot more, then 100% what I'd do is talk about it, find someone I trusted and speak about the situation, or speak to a counsellor and let them understand, because there's no doubt in my mind if I did speak about it, I would have felt a lot better about the situation, but because it was just me obsessing about the situation. So I think it is, the first step has to be understanding yourself, and then understanding your feelings, to go and express them feelings, to sort of take that weight off your shoulders of knowing it's out. I've said it now. I feel so much better about it.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. That and it's a tall order for a 19-year-old, maybe especially boys, to have that emotional intelligence. But in this society, we kind of demand it of everyone to be able to, or you kind of get punished by the world a little bit if you're not able to grow that emotional intelligence.
Yeah,
So
I think it is improving, and as time moves forward, it will further and further improve that more acceptance of mental health. We've all got mental health, just like we've got our physical health. It's always there, and it's how we treat that, how we learn about that, and I'm sure things will continue to improve. But I think it is that learning from a younger age of why we feel a certain way in certain situations.
I have to say, Luke, thank you so much for coming to the podcast and taking time out of. I know your schedule is very busy. I know that you have all these United supporter parties that you have to go to, but also thank you so much for that message of mental health, and for sharing your stories, sharing all your the things that you've learned, your routines, and everything that we've talked about. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for having me. It's been great chatting to you.
Perfect, and good luck on the game tomorrow.
Hopefully United will win.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.